All right, well, thank you for joining. We've got this is an interesting venue to be hosting, and people are really far away, so let's see how it goes. I might ask folks who are far away to get closer, but let's give it a few minutes and see how it fills out. I want to say, thank you all for joining. This is an exciting part of Devex Impact House that we've held from Monday, yesterday, and it's going through Wednesday. We've got a great slate of programs going on. I'm very pleased to have with us today Lisa Felton, who is the president, CEO of the Vodafone Foundation, the head of the Vodafone Foundation, we'll say. And we've been on a journey together for the past few months, and it's been a pretty fun journey. And it's sort of like a vacation, right? You take a road trip, a fun road trip, and you get there, and then more fun starts. And what happened today is we launched a report looking at how digital tools can help us address resilience and climate change resilience in various sectors, including health, education, and disaster relief. I think everyone here should have a copy of that report in their inbox. It's a good one. We've been working on it for about 8 months or so. So it's been a good one, and we're going to actually get a bit into that report later on about some of the specifics behind it. This is a fun little program today. We'll talk for a minute, and then we'll have a panel discussion. Then we'll talk about the report, and then later on, the bulk of this program, the meat of this program, is going to be everyone having table discussions, and really working to look at the themes of the report and what are the solutions that we can all come up with based on these themes. We don't expect you've actually read the report yet. Hopefully you've seen it, so don't worry about that. But Lisa, I just want to, I've been really excited about this journey. We cooked it up, you and I, in your offices in London months ago. I think it was late last year. And we just got excited about this idea. And I want to ask you, sort of, why were you excited about this idea, and what's in it for Vodafone Foundation?
Thanks, Alan, and thank you to everyone who managed to get through the traffic to get to us today. At Vodafone Foundation, our mission is to connect for good. So we use technology and our charitable giving to address some of the world's most pressing problems, and that's across digital skills, connecting in crisis, and tackling harm and abuse. And for all of our programs, technology is at the core. It's essential. What we started to notice last year and at the beginning of this year is we were having to adapt those programs because of climate change. So we needed to change them because certain things weren't working anymore. A great example is our instant network emergency response. This is a network which goes into a backpack. We can transport it anywhere around the world and get connectivity up and running in 15 minutes following a climate emergency. But we were finding, because of climate change, there were more disasters. They were more severe. We couldn't get the network there quick enough. Infrastructure such as airports were destroyed. So we have shifted that entire program from response to preparedness. And we have now national hubs. We train first responders on the ground. We train our own employees. So we've completely changed the way that program works. And we figured if we're having this challenge across all of our programs, others must be. And we'd love to learn from others, to learn from the best practice across the industry. Hence, we decided to do this report, ask experts the question of how do you adapt? What are the problems that you're seeing? And to create a blueprint to help others adapt and ensure that digital solutions could still make a real difference.
And I think that's so important because we've got two fast, rapidly changing things happening. One is the climate is rapidly changing, but the other, and that's a negative, of course, and the other one is technology is also rapidly changing, and that hopefully becomes a positive. We'll get more into that in a little bit, but yeah, thank you so much, Lisa, for doing this report with us. And again, this report that we'll get into is not it's not what Vodafone Foundation thinks. It's not what Devex thinks. But we surveyed more than 1,000 professionals and really understood their opinions on best solutions for this topic. So, Lisa, thank you so much for joining. All right, so we've got a short panel discussion here. We have, I think that we still have Joakim Reiter, who is Chief Chief Corporate Affairs Officer at Vodafone Group. We have Kelly Clements, who is the Deputy Commissioner at the UNHCR. And if you two can join up here. We also, we also have a third panelist who will be here in 2 minutes, Doreen Bogdan-Martin, who is the head of the ITU. So when she gets here, Sarah, you can send her up. Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining. Kelly, let me start with you here. You are dealing with some of the world's, you and your colleagues are dealing with some of the world's biggest challenges. And you've got climate displacements and other pieces at the same time as you're facing significant pushback on resources and other activities. How do you see digital tools as being able to better sort of protect the individuals and communities that you're serving?
Well, thank you very much. This is what we're dealing with. You've laid it out, is basically two big crises. You've got environmental factors, climate, running in face-to-face with forced displacement, the number of people that are on the move for war, conflict, persecution at record level highs across the globe. And what you see are those that are forced to flee are in some of the most climate vulnerable parts of the world, 3/4 of them, 90 million or so, finding themselves in these locations. So you can't look at a response, you can't look at protecting a population, delivering, and so on, if you don't consider the factors in the environment in which they find themselves, from a resiliency point of view, from a response point of view, and also if you're talking about solutions.
Okay, great. And Joakim, as we look at those solutions and adapting those digital solutions, and the title of the report has the 1.5 in it and a 1.5C world. What do you think it means from your perspective or Vodafone's perspective? What do you think it means to adapt to these new challenges?
Okay, so I've only been in Vodafone for 8 years. I can honestly tell you we hardly had any major catastrophe for our network. And remember, a lot of people depend on our network for their basic needs. It's now become a fundamental tool of functioning in a society and an economy to have access to connectivity. For 3 years, we didn't have a lot of problems. I can honestly tell you now we're dealing with problems one after another, storms in Ireland, storms in the UK, floods in Germany, wildfires in Turkey and Greece, not to mention the devastating effects we've had by typhoons and other things across Africa. So if you think about our core business, which is basically deploying an infrastructure for the benefit of society and the benefit of our customers, we're now having to reimagine what it implies to make that infrastructure resilient for a completely different operating environment. So, basic stuff. I had a discussion with the UK CTO where we were discussing how much more cement and steel do we need to put in the base stations. And so in order to make your network resilient for the type of challenges that we face in various jurisdictions, and the challenges are different, we have to have very deep local knowledge of the type of climate-induced crisis that is posed to the network, and then to adapt how we deploy the network accordingly. So that's a very significant change. The second change that we have been looking a lot on is how do we make sure that we build in climate resilience in all the products and services that we offer our customers. And by the way, we're just on the beginning of that journey. the last big wave was how do you build sort of trust by design, security and privacy. The next big wave is now how do you build climate resilience. And Lisa referred to that in terms of, will a tablet work when it's 50 degrees? Should a connected school be north-facing? I mean, these are very concrete examples that we did not have to deal with before. And then the third thing which we're debating a lot and deploying ourselves much more is how do we utilize our digital tools so as to boost the climate resilience of other societal functions? Because we do know that digital tools have a lot of positive effects. Yes, we need to improve the digital tooling and the connectivity from a climate resilience point of view, but actually we're part and parcel of making sure that others are also more climate resilient. That's a very significant change in our business model and the requirements that is put on us as a business, and we're just at the beginning of this journey, regrettably. We hope we wouldn't have to be here, by the way, and I think it's fair to say that we have moved to this position much faster, at an alarming rate, to be perfectly honest. It's now, we as a company always have to, towards the capital markets, report your top 10 risks. Climate resilience now sit as a horizontal label, as we call the risk number 11, and we have to review everything we do from the point of view of climate resilience. It's a big shift for us as a company.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I would come back in on this in terms of when you're thinking about those and shifting approaches and the like, using digital tools to be able to reach those people that are otherwise inaccessible. So, for example, we have created something called a digital gateway, where basically you have refugees, you have displaced people who, with it, using their own tools to be able to access services, information, and so on that otherwise would not be available. Or, for example, digital ID, which becomes then critical in terms of being able to register for services, to be able to identify what they're going to need in their places of displacement. Or even using technology and tools to be able to predict where people are going to move because of this overlay between climate, conflict, and persecution. These become very critical tools. I think all of us have tried to reform the way that we deliver beyond what was traditional, say, just a few years ago.
Right, and I love the work that your organization is doing, by the way, on innovation, and people wouldn't naturally think of UNHCR as being a particularly innovative organization. I think it is, but I'm just saying the public would not necessarily think that, but it is very innovative, and you're doing great work on there. Doreen, thank you for joining. I'm putting you into the lion's den here. You just arrived. I'm going to ask you the question of, ITU plays such an important sort of convening and thought leadership and programmatic role in bringing together sort of these tools that Kelly was talking about to help address these climate change and resilience and so forth. Can you talk a bit more about that and what you hope to be able to do in the future? I will give you my mic. I see another mic there. I'm going to grab that for myself.
Okay. Great, thank you, and sorry to be late. I was across town at the opening of the General Assembly. And I'll mention just one message that the Secretary General gave when he made his opening address this morning. He had a big focus on technology and the importance of ensuring that digital technologies benefit humanity. And of course, that can't happen if you have a third of the world's population unconnected. So I think that's also important to keep in mind. Also happy, Joakim, that we're continuing the discussion that we had together at MWC on this topic. And also I can confirm that Kelly and UNHCR are very innovative. And we have the pleasure of working super closely with them. I think when it comes to digital public infrastructure, and you were mentioning the importance of digital ID, the importance of mobile money, of course, in situations impacted by climate, impacted by other kinds of crises, I think we have to recognize digital as something that can be a game changer. But to do that, we also have to focus on investment, and we have to make sure that our investment is directed to climate resilient networks, which is so important. So it's networks that can actually withstand extreme weather. We were talking about that yesterday, Joakim, extreme weather events, ensuring that that we have strong fiber and that we also have redundancy built in case something goes down. And I think from our perspective at ITU, we think standards have also a critical role. So the ITU promotes green digital standards. So those standards are critical, and also promoting interoperability of networks and systems. We have a standard that we're very proud of, which is our CAP, the Common Alerting Protocol. We've been championing this with WMO to make sure that when a disaster happens, that we can actually get those warnings out there to alert communities at risk. And we have to make sure that there is, as I said, interoperability, and that those alerts can actually pass through different systems, through different networks, and of course throughout different countries. And I think, just to mention quickly, Joakim, what you've done with AST, for example, I think it's a great example of a mobile operator partnering, because partnership and collaboration, of course, is critical here, but a mobile operator partnering with, having a joint venture with a satellite company that can actually look at solutions like direct-to-device. So if normal networks can't get to those areas or the infrastructure has been destroyed, we can click on our satellite and actually provide connectivity through direct-to-device.
And I think that's an interesting point. And you come to so many of these meetings at the UN everywhere, and it's like, oh, what's the solution? Private sector solution. Now, if I'm in the private sector, we're kind of the solution, but it's not what we do. But what can the private sector, or what can Vodafone Group do to help close these gaps while also doing what you need to do, which is run a business? Like, what are the steps that you all can take? Not just Vodafone, but in general.
I think. Sometimes, particularly in government circles, is a question around the dichotomy between running a profitable business versus all the societal needs, be it redundancy, resilience, and stuff like that. Having spent 20 years in government, I think that dichotomy is almost flawed. And actually, this first basis for a business is not profitability. That's the derivative of what is your overriding objective, which is customers. And if you start from customers, then climate resilience is basically a natural consequence of serving your customer with the best service possible. Now, the challenge from a profitability point of view, if you take the company perspective, is the fact that some of these resilience or redundancies that Doreen referred to, which is very much on our mind right now, drives up the cost base. So together with government, and particularly in telecoms, where a lot of our underlying profitability is determined by regulation and policies by governments, we need to have a different conversation with governments around how do we absorb the additional cost. And in Europe, that is not only climate resilience and redundancy, it's also around security. Governments increasingly want networks that are dedicated for military use. Well, that's actually a redundancy that is idle for the everyday people that you keep just in case there is a military conflict. Well, that's capacity not used, that's the sunk cost. We need to be able to absorb the cost. But I don't think there is a tension, frankly, between profitability and, say, climate resilience or any form of resilience or redundancy, assuming that every company starts from first and foremost around how does it serve its customers. Because the customers are crying out for a network that can withstand a flood or a storm or wildfire. And we know that, and that's our job to overcome that. And we take that job very, very seriously. Doreen made a reference, and I get sort of childishly excited when we talk about convergence of technologies. Because there is a perception that, you have the same solution all the time and you're going to get different outcomes. It doesn't really work like that. The mobile industry is never going to be able to cover geographically an entire jurisdiction. It's just uneconomical. And we can sweat the asset to the max in the sense of utilizing the revenue we have from urban dwellings to go further and further out in the rural communities. But by the convergence of mobile telephony with satellite, we can reimagine what it means not only for rural coverage, but also what it means for resilience and redundancy. So, for example, where you have the power, in Valencia, when we had the mudslide, we deployed a satellite solution that created a Wi-Fi hotspot that made sure that emergency services could get connectivity up and running when all the base stations had been taken out. That works for a geographically located, limited area. If you talk about a nationwide climate catastrophe or any other form of political catastrophe that then knocks the network out or is hybrid warfare, you're not going to be able to deploy mobile base stations or antennas for satellite connectivity and create Wi-Fi hotspots. It's impossible. So that's why we started experimenting what Doreen referred to, direct to device. So we use low orbit, basically a flying base station. And the flying base station then picks up the terrestrial signal that otherwise would have covered with base stations on the ground. And it connects up and communicates straight to individual phones, unaltered phones. Now, that will never be a cat movie style experience for customers. It's not a great customer experience, but in a choice between no connectivity and having this connectivity is a game changer. So from a resilience point of view, from a redundancy point of view, from a backup point of view, from a security point of view, and from a climate resilience point of view and rural connectivity, is a fantastic new development. And it becomes, the possibility arises from the fact that there's convergence in technologies between mobile industry and satellite. And oftentimes, sectoral mindset kicks in, silos kicks in, just in corporate sector as in businesses. So we have tried to break that by basically saying we're not going to be a satellite company tomorrow as Vodafone, but by partnering with someone who's world-class on satellite, let's bring the best of two worlds to the benefit of our customers.
I think it's great. And actually, Kelly, one of the reasons why my impression of UNHCR's innovation is so high is because of the work that you all are doing on payments and using an all of the above strategy, looking at Bitcoin, looking at USDC, looking at traditional methods just to make sure that you can get those payments to the ground, working with Carmen Het, your amazing treasurer. And so with that in mind, as you look to solve the world's largest challenges, what organizations, and you don't have to name names if you don't want, but what types of organizations do you see as being most effective in doing this and using innovation to do this?
Thanks. Good save. No, in all seriousness, I think this is, we've gone in lots of directions in terms of doing things differently and delivering better. But it really isn't up to us. It is up to the people that we're working with, refugees, displaced people. They know best. So what we've found, and in fact we have created, to get to the point on innovation, we've created a refugee-led innovation fund where there are ideas that are then tested, looking at how we can scale those ideas. We have groups that we have actually put money into their hands to be able to test the ideas that they have, including, for example, an indigenous women's group in Panama that's looking at environmental mapping, for example, or a feedback mechanism with regard to adolescent youth in Kenya in terms of refugees to tell us how is the WhatsApp group working and how is it better providing information, for example, on reproductive health or other services that perhaps they are in need of. So this is not about UNHCR or the many partners that we may work with, except for those at the community and local level. So I think to get them involved and to shift the decision making so that they are making the decisions on what is going to work best for them, a little bit like Joakim's comment about the customers. These are our customers, and they can define and they can shape the kinds of services that are going to be delivered and to be able to test and scale up. And this is the way it should work.
Great. And Doreen, I'm going to close out with you here. ITU is leading the Pillar 3 of the UN's Early Warnings for All initiative. How many staff does ITU have?
We just over 750, 800 maybe.
So 750 people probably cannot solve that alone. What do you see as your role in helping to solve that, and what can others do?
Thank you. So it's about partnerships, I think. ITU obviously can't do it alone, so we need to work with partners like Vodafone, like UNHCR. We have a great initiative on refugee connectivity, just by the way. But I think what ITU brings, we also bring technical solutions. So we have 194 countries, we have 1,000 private sector members, we have the technical organizations, the academic organizations, and they work on standards. And so coming back to this common alerting protocol, this is key to the Early Warning for All initiative. And it's a great example of partnership because it's ITU, WMO, UNDRR, IFRC, and we're committed to making sure all countries in the world have an early warning system by 2027. And what's incredible is that it could happen tomorrow because technologically the solutions are there. But today only more than half or less than half, about half of the world's populations have early warning systems in place. So that means that when a disaster is about to happen or when a disaster happens, those messages, life-saving messages, can't get out to the populations that need it. So in our Pillar 3, we're basically advancing this common alerting protocol to make sure that you can use cell broadcast to get those messages out. Today, 4 out of 5 people have a mobile phone, not necessarily a smartphone. So that's going to be the device that will help get these messages across using cell broadcast. And Joakim is a big partner in this effort, GSMA and others. And we're determined, leveraging the 97% mobile coverage that we have on this planet, leveraging the mobile phone holders, that we can get those messages out there, work with partners, and save lives.
Great. Well, on that, I want to thank all three of you, Joakim and Kelly and Doreen, for joining us on this panel today. Hopefully you can stick around a little bit. I know there might have to be some departures, but thank you, and please join us in thanking. So Joe has been our partner in crime on the launch of this report. And I actually don't have, could we move slides here? And so as I mentioned, we launched a report today, this morning, and you should have it in your inbox. This report is looking at what 1,000 people that we surveyed think are the best ways to address climate change resilience. And we looked specifically at health, education, and disaster relief, but more broadly for the SDGs. But we did ask a lot of very specific questions about that. Joe is tell me if I get this wrong, Senior Manager for Sustainability at Vodafone Foundation?
Yeah, I always say to Lisa, my job title seems to change depending on the meeting I'm in.
Okay.
But that will do, yeah.
Okay, yes. So he's been very much in the weeds on this. And if we, so here's the name of the report, Tech 1.5, Adapting Digital Solutions for 1.5C World. We surveyed just over 1,000 individuals for this. We did in-depth interviews with many others to help sort of get more, expand on some of the thoughts from the online survey. And then we also did a couple of roundtables, sort of leader roundtable discussions earlier this year that I know many people in this room participated in, so thank you for that. And all of that, we came up with some ideas. If we can move to the next slide. So basically, I kind of got into this. Maybe we move to the next slide here. So one of the things is that what we found, it was a hypothesis that I think was supported by the data. We all know that climate change is impacting the SDGs. And you'll see here the data of people that believe that 96% say is negatively impacting disaster resilience, 94% health, 87% education. So obviously you can't get 96% to agree on much, and they agree on this. So it is negatively impacting SDGs. This is a supported hypothesis. This is not new research. But what was interesting to me is the amount that climate change is also affecting the technology and tools that we have available to actually address those problems. And I think that's kind of a compounded issue that we also need to look at. Things like, and it seems to be kind of a cycle, an unvirtuous cycle in a way, but we think if we can build technology to address these, I think that it can help on the former, and we can hopefully mitigate challenges on the latter. If we can just move to the next one here. Joe, you were knee-deep in this, in the data, in the analysis, and we came up with 4 key findings. I'd love for you to dig into those key findings a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. And also thank you very much, Doreen, Kelly, and Joakim for the panel. You have very eloquently covered all of the things that I'm going to talk about now, so thanks for that. And also thank you all for coming to what is sadly ironic, a greenhouse, to talk about this topic. As Alan said, from the data we found 4 challenges. The first one, it was really around infrastructure. And again, it's something that Doreen and Joakim spoke about. 69% of the respondents to our survey and work cited infrastructure damage as one of the key contributors to the challenge of disruption of digital tools in a climate shock. Joakim mentioned floods in Ireland, Germany. If we recall the floods in Pakistan in 2022, which were caused by unseasonal monsoon weather and collapsing glaciers, had a huge impact on loss of life. Obviously, power went down, digital technology went down as well. When the power goes out, you cannot deliver digitally. So that's the challenge. In terms of the response to that challenge, I think it's about investing in resilient infrastructure with decentralized energy, renewables, and the sort of hybrid backup systems that we need to really keep this critical infrastructure operating even in the toughest conditions. So that's challenge number 1. If we move on to challenge number 2, is more about the actual physical design of digital solutions to really make sure they're fit for purpose in a 1.5 degree planet. 95% of respondents agreed that digital technology can help with the impacts of climate change. However, only 55% believe that the current tools are adequately adapted. So again, the solutions that we can build out there are around low energy consumption, offline functionality, and one of my favorite topics, which is about modular design. So ensuring that digital tools in the development context can be created using modular systems which can be repaired and, more importantly, repaired locally using skilling up and making opportunities for economies there. So that's around fit-for-purpose design. The third challenge that we found from the research was around skills, digital skills, local relevance, and also local co-creation of solutions. The number 1 enabler for effective climate adaptation of digital tools is capacity building and digital literacy, and this was 55% of respondents citing this as a key enabler. Of course, it's not just about skills themselves. Doreen mentioned the big gap we've got in terms of access and usage, also enabling the sort of devices to be put in the hands of people who most need them, and also addressing the technology gaps, especially around women, youth, and other marginalized, or I should say, and marginalized groups. So yeah, really co-creation of solutions with communities, I think, is really key. And having the skills to design, deploy these, and operate these solutions, as well as, to my point around modular design, being able to build and mend. So on to the final challenge, the 4th challenge, which is really around collaboration and investment. And again, with the panel, we heard about the importance of partnerships. And I know the ITU do an absolutely fabulous job of convening partnerships, and through Partner to Connect and other platforms are doing an absolutely amazing job. But this really needs to continue. We need to align policies and financing use development financing to sort of crowd in capital and scale what really works. 81% of people in the survey said that there's not enough collaboration. So I think that really speaks volumes, that we can have events like this and we can present results like this. I think the key thing is to use the blueprint to actually take action rather than just let the report gather dust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in that blueprint, do you want to talk a bit about that? Like in addition to the findings here, like what's the next step? Is it just doing more on all 4 of these issues, or what's the call to action here?
Yeah, so the culmination of those, understanding what the challenges are, we created a blueprint of suggested sort of responses to all 4 of these challenges. And within that also, the sort of actions that all actors maybe want to consider taking. So we've really tried to make it a practical blueprint for action, we call it. And within that blueprint are the responses to these 4 challenges that I've described.
Yeah, well, that's all so important. And all of these, I think, all of these challenges and calls to action are things that I think everyone in this room can easily make, well, not easily, but everyone can make a difference on, and I'm sure everyone wants to make a difference on. And I'm looking around the room, and I think that these are all people that should be making a difference on and are able to, based on where their organization sits or where they sit. So that's great. I think that I know that you just started eating, but this is where we start to get into the meat of the conversation here. No pun intended if there's meat in your food, sorry. But we'll get in the meat of the conversation, and everyone has on their table, everyone has a sort of a theme. One of these 4 challenges that Joe just mentioned, and everyone has a table lead. Maybe I'll just call out the table leads just so everyone's aware. Okay, so we have, the 4 are obviously related to what Joe just said, infrastructure gaps. And we've got Pradeep here, who led a table for me yesterday. So thank you for doing double duty here. And Blair Thomas, who's with UNICEF. Blair? Raising hand. Okay, thank you. Okay, great. On designing shortcomings, we have limited skills and participation with Yolanda Wright. And, there you go. Okay, great. This is a big room to have to scan over. Yolanda Wright and, let's see, Lucinda Donat. There we go. And we have fragmented collaboration with Louise. You're there? Yes, there you go. Hi, Louise. And Heather Grady from Rockefeller. Louise is from Accenture, Development Partners. Heather Grady. There, okay, there we go. And thank you all so much. I see there's a couple of tables that only have like 3 or 4 people at them. If you want to stay at that table, you're welcome to. If you want to join one of the other tables, you're welcome to as well. Feel free. It's up to you. But what we're going to do is we're going to get into groups, and I'm going to, I guess we have, I think about 30 minutes or so. And is that right, about 30 minutes-ish? Okay, we have 25, 30 minutes to go into these groups, and please, open conversation. At the end, what I'll do is I will call on the table leads to just share some of the findings, and hopefully we come up with some good ideas. I don't know if we'll come up with all the solutions, but hopefully we can come up with at least things that get to the 4th pillar, which is creating partnerships and working together. So thank you, and I'll pause. Joe, anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. Just enjoy your meal and the conversation. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I'm actually really pleased to be joined here by Sangbu Kim. Sangbu. Okay, Sangbu's deep in conversation. Sangbu, okay, Sangbu Kim, who's the Vice President for Digital at the World Bank. The World Bank, the World Bank has always been really important, but I think it's more important now than it ever has been in the past. It has such an oversized role in what's going on, especially in this area, especially in the 4 challenges we came up with. and is really in a position to drive things forward. So Sangbu, thank you for joining. And he also joined one of our roundtable discussions at our first roundtable discussion we had at Mobile World Congress months ago. So I'm sure things have progressed a lot since then. And I just wanted to ask him to say a few words on sort of how he thinks, how the World Bank thinks about how to use technology to best address these issues.
Yeah.
It should go.
Do you hear me? Oh. So actually, the World Bank, only for digital, we have been investing more than $1.3 billion for the resilience and sustainability for digital tools. So this is the real the priority to make sure that every digital asset should be very safe and resilient for any climate events and etc. On the other hand, we are deeply understand the importance of the digital's role to tackle the climate event and change because we had a lot of demand from our client government about the early alarming system or some supporting the refugee camp with the digital. And even I was so impressed and surprised that even many people in refugee camp really needs digital connection because they can find some job through online. They can work in the refugee camp through the network connections. It helped them a lot. On the other hand, some government support through the digital tool is really critical for them. In many climate or some certain accident, people cannot really access to the value transferring from the government. So some government payment system through the digital will be really playing crucial role to tackle that one. So this is how we are doing. But the reality we are seeing is that at least 20% of the global populations are at high risk of the climate change events, at least 20%, maybe more than that. So we are really trying very hard to find some basic infrastructure for including the accessibility and even some device distribution is core. Because many people are not still having the mobile internet accessibility. Maybe more than 3 billion people not using internet. That means even though they have some phone, this is only 2G phone. Many people are not really using the internet and get access to the information through the mobile. So one of the biggest program for us to pave the basic the road is device distribution program. So we are really keen to develop some more reasonable and practical solutions for that.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and just really appreciate that. And I especially appreciate that you all are leaning into this issue and not leaning away from it, and really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, so we're going to do some table readouts here. Let's see, if folks want to, if there's room, there might not be room actually, we've pretty much filled out. So why don't we stay where we are? And we only have about 12 minutes left, so I'm going to ask the table leads we'll ask one person for each topic to speak. And then if the other person who is the table lead wants to add to that, I'll invite you to add to that. So let's go back. Sorry, let me go back to the tables here because I can't read them all on the table thing. But we'll start with infrastructure gaps. I know Pradeep, Blair, I know you were both leading tables on this topic. I would just love if you could just go over some of the findings that you had and what you can report back. Do you want to fight it out, or do someone want to volunteer? Okay, Pradeep, I'll go with you here if you want to start with some of your thoughts, and then Blair, you can jump in afterward with anything you want to add.
sometimes the best of infrastructure fails even here, so this works. Okay, we had a very interesting group, private sector, UN system, public sector, so good. Okay, so the main barriers we looked at, one, we already know that 70% of social infrastructure, social sector infrastructure, health, education, does not have electricity, and a similar percentage is not connected, so it doesn't have connectivity. The report also says that infrastructure damage and connectivity disruption is a major challenge. While that is a big problem, the other challenge is that investments often in this sector is siloed, so you end up education trying to solve their own problem, health trying to solve their own problem. And the disconnect between technology and communities, and Valencia was used as an example earlier, but that also came up here, that when communities do not know what the technology delivers for them and when they don't own it, it may not be necessarily an infrastructure, but it's a major gap. Solutions we looked at, one is, it came consistently, we need to leverage private sector infrastructure and incentivize for that to be used by the social sector. And two was leapfrog and the role of private sector there. Starlink came up several times as an example. And the importance of public sector to frame principles and policy and incentivize and de-risk private sector investment in infrastructure. And then actionable recommendations, one, technology that is owned and embedded in communities so that the digital infrastructure that is built is not just standing in isolation, but it is really used by the people who it is supposed to serve, and invest in building capacities to use the infrastructure and the policies around it. I'll stop there. Over to you.
Great, thanks for that. And Blair, I was sitting at your table, and we had some interesting discussion as well. So if you would like to add anything to that?
Sure. I think, well, first of all, I want to acknowledge that we had all ladies at our table, and then Alan joined us. So that's an infrastructure gap.
I busted the party. Sorry.
One of the things, just to build on what Pratik was saying, is that we discussed that it's important that there's a voice in the conversation, and that you're designing for and with those with the lived experience. I think that in all innovation and technology, like, things will fail if you're not actually understanding what the market really needs. Lisa's from the DRC. She was talking about some of the infrastructure gaps and projects that they're working on with Vodacom. And it was really about also how you're creating access to the things that you might need most. If you don't have electricity, you can't access the network to even charge your phone or even use it. So that was kind of the nexus of our conversation. I think some of the other things that we were talking about in just as solutions, and Elena said to really think about a prescriptive approach also of how you're looking at the built environment. So AI is nice, but if you don't understand the built environment you're working in, then it also becomes sort of useless. And then lastly, I'll just say again, inclusive design, right? So if you build solutions that work for the people that are most in need, they will likely then work for everyone. So that's our takeaways from our table, but thank you for having us.
And this is why development institutions are so important, because at the end of the day, the private sector is going to be leading on this, but I don't want to name names, but so often they forget about that last part. and so it is so important that development institutions help them along the way. Let's see, what else do we have here? We have design shortcomings. Goodness, that leads into that well. Where's design shortcomings? Okay, there. Why don't we go there? Go ahead.
Thank you. I think we also talked a lot about the infrastructure gaps, really, to start with, in terms of the main barriers. So the infrastructure gaps in terms of connectivity, access to power, or charging, affordability of devices, data protection, etc., etc. And also how there's a siloed approach in putting these things together. Then we also talked a little bit about the content, so not only the infrastructure, but also making sure, for example, when you have a healthcare system, when you have healthcare workers, that you can respond and target those healthcare professionals with adapted content, and there that we would need some more evidence and data in order to do that. In terms of key solutions, we do need, solutions that are inclusive, that are context-specific, and also when you plug those solutions into the local setting, that you have a mindful of the business model and that, and how you're putting all these things together across the ecosystem. You need to invest in more cost-effective devices and adaptive responses. I think those were the main things.
Sounds great. And is there a second designing infrastructure table? Or was that the one? Okay, that is the one. There's design shortcomings, sorry. That was the one? Okay, great. So we'll move to limited skills and participation. Oh, we're going that way. Okay, oh, here. Okay, perfect. And we'll give Sarah a second to get the mic over there. I would love to learn.
Thanks. We were a blended table, so I'll go first. And then, so I think there's a lot of resonance with what other people have said, honestly, which is like meeting people where they're at and involving the end users that you're having in mind in the design. So we talked about e-health facilities and mobile money, that we have to recognize that often, for example, women don't have the ownership of the mobile phone, don't even have an identity. So you have to have a big push to even get women identity so they can then have mobile money accounts, then let alone electricity to plug their phone in, to get the set. So I think the themes that we've heard around the room were echoed with us. So our actionable recommendations are clearly understand who you're trying to reach and involve them in the design. Start where they are. So maybe you need to start with lower tech solutions, MP3 things that can play on a feature phone rather than expecting everybody to have access to smartphones and the internet. Ensure that government and private sector are involved in setting a kind of regulatory environment that works for everyone, and that does things like help to push for inclusion. And then there was a lot about how women can be champions. Once you get women involved in mobile money and also training and literacy programs and things that are enabled through digital inclusion, they will become like the champions for their children, etc. So there was, women were the best advocates in the long run. But overall, just bear in mind that while technology is leaping forwards, some people are still really not out of the starting blocks. They don't even have an ID and a feature phone. So kind of bringing those people along.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Just briefly. That's absolutely true. So the digital chasm is expanding, and addressing that is critical. So women, as a part of the solution, and multiplier impact came through really strongly in our conversations, working with them within their communities to uplift them and their children was key. I think we also talked about how things needed to be affordable. We really need to recognise that it's a massive challenge to reach the most marginalised. So we need affordable solutions and really be thinking about scale alongside connectivity and safety. And I think one more thing that came through really strongly was that we also need to make sure that we're not just working with communities and co-creating with them. We need to be educating the donors as well so they understand the real challenges that we face. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And last but not least, I think something that we can all sign on to is how we can support ending fragmented collaboration and have effective collaboration. So we'll move to that.
Great, thank you. Well, I had a wonderful, very engaged group from counterterrorism to oceans to geospatial data. We covered it all. So in terms of the barriers, a little acronym, TAT. First one, T for trust, recognizing that actually there is a lack of trust between the sectors, and that can be a challenge as we often talk a different language. The A was for awareness. Actually, sometimes we don't know what is already out there. And if we can actually raise that awareness, then that will help. And then the other T for TAT was time, that there's a misalignment of time. So if you look at from a private sector perspective, actually we want to be at the table at the start and not just at the end. But everyone has to recognise that timescales are different for different sectors, and we should keep that in mind. So those were the barriers. In terms of solutions, inclusive design has been mentioned many times. It's so important, so that actually we're bringing the right solutions, the right services in the right time, in the right place. And then think about augmented responses. How do you actually have an iterative feedback loop about when you're doing that design process and connect the macro to the micro? And then in terms of recommendations, really thinking about how you create more localized working groups, bringing in government, not just national government, but also municipal and local government, as the needs can be quite different, and really create those local champions to really ensure that that collaboration continues and is successful. And finally, and I've always seen this in partnerships, just be really clear about what everybody is bringing to the table. If you're not bringing something unique and different, you probably don't need to be there. So don't just partner and collaborate for collaboration's sake.
Great, thanks, Louise. And Heather, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Thank you. Just a couple last things to add. In terms of barriers, a lot of these solutions do depend on good governance leadership, but governments are often fragmented themselves. And smaller organizations doing a lot of the really high impact work are not yet visible online. Many of them are not. For solutions, needing a better inventory and mapping of who's doing what, because that still doesn't really exist globally or at the local level. And in terms of actionable recommendations, our table really emphasized listening to those whom we are serving, getting their voices more into the planning, and again, making those local organizations without a digital footprint more visible online. Thank you.
Well, that seems to be a thread that goes across all of this, is making sure that the people that are being affected by whatever technological changes, whatever other changes, are actually participating in the creation of those solutions. So I think we can all come away with that. I think we can all come away with that this is a great group. We're really sort of, I feel like we're in a forest here, and with police officers behind me coming after us. But it's been a fun event here, and I want to thank our partners from Vodafone Foundation again for putting this on with us. This has been a really exciting partnership. Thanks to all of you for participating in this event, and many of you for participating in some of the other events and interviews and surveys and all of this stuff. And again, I want to encourage you to read the report that we sent. It should be in your inbox this morning. There's a whole website that is on, a microsite that is on, so you can read some of the key findings there as well. But yeah, thanks to our speakers, and thanks to you all for being active participants, and appreciate it. We will have continued programming here at Devex Impact House, and hope you can stick around for more of it. Thank you.